Welcome to Sonny's, the car wash factory. My name is David Guzman. I'm a senior mechanical engineer here at Sonny's, and I'd like to take a moment to go over the procedure to making sure your turbine is properly aligned before startup. The first thing we want to do is make sure we bring the unit to its final resting location where it's going to be connected and plumbed. Once we bring it at this location, we're going to set on the included rubber pads that come in your kit. The most important step, or one of the most important steps, is to make sure that your unit is level. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure that the frame is level using 3 different planes. On the bottom of the turbine, to make sure it's level from the long direction, we're going to go on the side of the 3x3 beam to make sure it's level vertically. And then on the back of the motor, we're going to put the level and make sure that the unit is level from side to side. One of the most important things is do not tighten your anchors. Once we anchor the unit down, we're using the anchors to make sure that the unit does not shift side to side, and they should always be loose so that the turbine can float over the vibration pads. One of the most common mistakes that we see is that installers will tighten down the anchors, and what happens is it introduces different stresses to the frame that causes vibration. We want the unit to be able to freely float and help with the vibration. Once the unit has been set and leveled and it's resting on the vibration pads, we're going to proceed to take over the coupler guard to make sure we can check for alignment. After taking off the coupler guard, you will see that the unit comes with 2 couplers already installed. It comes with a 1 5/8 coupler on the motor side and a 1 1/2 inch coupler on the turbine side. The coupler locking collar has also been set loose on the turbine side. This is important because before we start the unit, we want to make sure we install the insert and our locking collar before we start it up. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to align the teeth on the 2 couplers as shown. After we have them aligned, we're going to be checking for 3 different types of misalignment. There's axial misalignment, which means how far apart the shafts are from each other. We're going to check for angular misalignment, which means how far the 2 shafts are pointing in different directions from each other. And last but not least, we'll check for parallel misalignment, which means like if the 2 shafts are properly aligned with each other, how much shift in 2 different directions there is. To do this, we're going to use the shims that are included in your kit. So in your kit, you'll find 3 different shims: a 0.01 shim, a 0.075 shim, and a 0.060 shim. And between the combination of these 3 shims, we'll be able to do all the alignment. The other tool you're going to need is, I'm using a long keyway here as a straight edge. You can also use any straight edge that you have. So the first thing we're going to do is check for angular and axial misalignment. And we're going to do that by checking the distance in between the 2 teeth that line up to each other. So if we take our 060 shim and we put it together with our 0.01 shim, this is going to give us a thickness of about 0.07. And we're going to make sure that on every tooth location, this shim combination can go in between the teeth. So we're going to check all the different teeth going above and below the turbine. Now, we're going to take our 075 shim and we're going to put it together with our 01 shim. This is going to create a thickness of about 085. And this is your no-go gauge. So essentially, this should not be able to go into any of the teeth openings. As you can see, it doesn't go in, right? So what this does is this is ensuring that your distance is always between 0.07 and 0.085, which is what's going to make it so that our coupler works properly. Now we're going to check for the parallel misalignment. And what that means is whether the motor needs to go up or down or side to side. We've already checked for angular and axial misalignment. To do that, we're going to use our straight edge. And we're going to place a straight edge on the coupler side that is, when you do the teeth, there's always going to be one tooth that sits a little bit higher than the other. You can feel that with your fingers. Or ideally, I mean, if they're pretty flush, it shouldn't matter. But you're going to place your straight edge on one of the teeth. And you're going to press down to make sure that the straight edge is flat with the tooth. Then we're going to take our 001 shim and we're going to try to slide it underneath the straight edge. As you can see, this one has really good alignment. You can't get the shim in there. And we're going to do that in a few different locations: at the top, the side, and the bottom. So what if there was an issue? All the turbines leave the factory we've been testing them with this same procedure. And not only that, but we also run every single turbine for 1 hour to make sure it reaches working temperature, and then we run the procedure again. So ideally, you shouldn't have to mess with your alignment if nothing has moved. However, in the case that something has moved, how do we adjust for alignment? So if you find that there's an issue with your parallel alignment, meaning like you find that the motor is maybe too far to one direction or the other, you're going to have to move forward to loosen the 4 bolts that hold on to the motor. So these 4 bolts have been tied to a torque spec, so they're going to be pretty tight. But you have to loosen these, and then with the rubber mallet, we're going to tap the motor in different directions to make sure that it shifts side to side. If your alignment is off, your parallel alignment or angular alignment is off from top to bottom, we're going to have to shim the motor. So on the angular alignment test, if you find that, say the 0.85 width thickness fits on the bottom of the motor, meaning that the gap at the bottom is too big, then what we want to do is we're going to have to shim the front of the motor, okay? Which means the 2 front bolts. And vice versa, if you find that the gap is too tight on the bottom, then that means we have to shim the back of the motor. Once we've ensured that this is tight, if we did loosen the motor, the 4 bolts that tie in the motor, we want to make sure we put those back on. The recommendation for putting these back on is, as you put them on, you want to make sure the motor doesn't move because you've already tested for your alignment. So we want to do a cross pattern when tightening these bolts. So you want to loosely tighten one corner, come to the opposite corner, next corner, and keep doing this cycle until they're all tight. This is important. This is going to help you so that the motor doesn't move. When you tighten these bolts, the torque spec is 57 foot-pounds. So it's important that these are tightened to the right torque to make sure that you don't have any issues moving forward. Once the motor has been tightened down, we want to make sure that we check rotation. The reason why this the locking collar is on the turbine side is because we want you to be able to check for rotation on the motor side before you connect the coupler. The coupler is directional, so it's important that the motor is rotating at the correct direction. So a licensed electrician will wire up the motor, and as someone's inspecting the motor, they should do a quick on and off cycle to get the motor turning. This quick cycle would allow you to check rotation. Rotation should match the arrow on the turbine. So if you're looking at the back of the motor, it should be counterclockwise. But again, refer to your arrow on the casting on the turbine. If rotation is wrong, they must rewire the motor. They need to change the wiring so that it rotates in the opposite direction. Once we make sure that the alignment is has properly been checked, we're going to move forward to placing our coupler in. And the coupler is a split coupler, and it is directional. So you'll see on the coupler that there's kind of like a T. There's a groove that is pointing in direction. We're going to make sure that this groove is always pointing opposite to the arrow of rotation on the turbine. As you can see, we're going to place the groove on this side. We're going to open the coupler and slide it over the teeth. The coupler should be loose, should be able to slide back and forth, and you should be able to see this groove opposite to the arrow right here in front of the turbine. After we've placed this coupler in, we're going to take our locking collar and we're going to slide that over the coupler. One thing to note here is the collar has protrusions in the inside, and those protrusions align with the grooves on the coupler. So if you see this groove on the outside, we're going to make sure that that groove lines up with this other groove on the flex element, and that's going to make sure that that tooth slides in. After that slides in, we're going to make sure it's center. To make sure it's center, that puts the protrusion on the locking collar in the center of the flex element, and that's going to allow us to lock it so it doesn't fly off. So to do that, we're going to rotate the collar opposite to the rotation of the turbine. So we're going to hold on to the coupler, and we're going to rotate that collar, and that locks it in. This is a really crucial step because this is a directional coupler, so we want to make sure it stays on the turbine by using centrifugal force on the locking collar, which means that as it's rotating, the weight of the element tilts it backwards, and that's what allows it to stay on. Another important thing to note during startup is do not grease your bearings. So your turbine bearings have been pre-greased at the factory, and you don't need to grease them on startup. They're already greased. So please refer to your owner's manual for the greasing schedule, but you don't have to do this on startup. Once you've checked that the alignment is still correct after 1 hour of operation, we are safe to put our belt guard back on. It's important if you're running the unit for an hour without the belt guard, make sure that it is properly sealed off, that nobody can get to it. Or if you prefer, just put the coupler cover back on, run it for an hour, then take it back off to do your alignment again. This has been a quick overview on the things that you need to know before starting up your vacuum producer. If you have any questions, as always, please feel free to reach out to our tech support team at sonnysdirect.com. You can also scan the code that we've added to the coupler guard. By scanning this code, it'll take you to documentation that you can download with the same instructions that I've just gone over. And as always, thank you, good luck, and good washing.